We're going to start for the next 2 weeks. We're going to be getting into a new sermon series called My Jesus Story, and we're going to be talking about that and focusing on that because I don't know if you remember, but in the beginning of the year, I had a message one time, one of the Sundays, and I said that one of the things, people make New Year resolutions that we leave behind, and I thought that it would be great if for the next year we could, as a church, as individuals, we could focus on Jesus a lot more, make Jesus a lot more present and real in our lives, in our everyday walk, in our everyday decisions, in the attitudes that we have, in the way that we treat people, in the way that we shape our priorities. And it's not just, it's different when you make some rules or make some decisions. It's different from when you have a relationship that shapes you, that just determines and defines the things that we say, how we act towards other people. And so I thought it would be good for us to really look at, because Jesus, when we read about his ministry, it was all about interacting with people, encounters with people. And so each of those people, each of them have their Jesus story. And we're going to look at some of them. And maybe we can, though they can remind us of some things, maybe they can encourage us to do some things or to strive for some things. And I just hope it's going to be a great time where we can really focus our eyes on Jesus and what he said, what he did, and how he treated people, and what was his mission and purpose. And so this is what I wanted us to do today, and hopefully it will help each and every one of us to grow in our personal relationship with Jesus. So, I don't know how closely you follow the news, but there's how many breaking news did you hear last week? Did you hear any? If you heard any breaking news, or you were watching something, and then sometimes they even interrupt the show or something, and they're like, breaking news, and the news comes up. And so usually there's a lot of them. There's a lot of breaking going on. There's a lot of breaking news coming up, anything like, he sneezed. Oh, breaking news, he sneezed. Sometimes news are not so breaking, but I don't know if you noticed or not, the big breaking news, they come and they go. They're very short-lived. You probably cannot remember some of the breaking news from 3 weeks ago. It was big breaking news, but you just can't even remember. 2 weeks ago, later, you can't even remember. The breaking news, they are very short-lived. And today's big news is no news tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be another big news, another big breaking news. But today, it is a big deal, and everybody's focused on this. You get people, the news is going crazy. They're covering this the breaking news, the big news that happened. Everybody is talking about it. People are calling each other, texting each other. People go on social media, the just explode. You have some experts, expressing and getting into fights in the comments. They're just trying to convert people and prove some points. And they talk and they get into arguments and conflicts and everything. And so it's just one of those things. Well, today's story that we're going to read with you, I think it would fall into that category of big news, of breaking news, if it was, if they had the same news coverage as we do have today. It would definitely make the news for sure. And it was definitely big news back then. And you know what? In fact, it is still a big news 2,000 years later. Let's read, we're going to be in John chapter 2. Gospel of John chapter 2. We'll start in verse 1 and go through verse 11. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out, and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then they called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So, in verse 11, it says it was the first miracle that Jesus performed. It was a big deal for the disciples especially. It says they believed in him. So it's an interesting situation. It's an interesting story. And if there was news coverage that day, that time, like today, I mean, just think about this. How crazy it would get. You would get the news reporters, they would just interview the eyewitnesses, and they would have the stories. And people, like I said, in social media, they would just explode, People would report and tell, "Hey, look, I've been there. This is what happened." And there would be some expert from his parents' basement, saying, "No, I know all about those things, and things like that, they don't happen." And people would just start arguing and fighting with each other and things like that. So the reporters would show up, the big news, and say, "Now we're live from the exactly same spot that this thing that many people call miracle, that we're here reporting live from the spot, and we're here with the eyewitnesses." And so they would interview. And so they would probably interview the bride and the groom, and they would say, "Yeah, he's a great guy. He saved our wedding. When we just didn't plan. We didn't plan well. We didn't have enough wine. We weren't prepared. It was going to be an embarrassing situation. Where can we find more wine? Like at the spot, we just found out, and it was embarrassing. And he just provided, and he's a great guy. He saved our wedding. He made our day." They would interview the master of the banquet. He would say, "It's the best party ever. Best party ever. Choice, food, and drinks. Best you can get." They would interview the guests, and they would say, "It was awesome. The longer the party went, the better the food and especially the drinks got. The longer it went, the better it tasted." And so they would probably interview Mary as well, Jesus' mom. And they said, "Well, tell us your story." And they say, "Well, my son, he didn't really want to get involved, but like moms do, she would say, he needed a little push, He's so shy, he's so gentle. I just had to push him, go, do it, okay? Put him on the spot." And they would interview disciples probably, and the disciples would say, yeah, Jesus is a big deal. It's a real deal. I mean, we heard him teach. It was good. But when we saw this, yeah, it's the real deal. You know, when we read, I mean, this is a familiar story. We read about it. We read it. I don't know how many times you've read it or heard it, many times before. But there's another group of people in that story that I don't know if the reporters would interview them, but they were actually the real participants of what was going on. They were like, they had the front row seat to what was happening. And I'm talking about the servants who were actually there. And if they interviewed them, because they had their Jesus story, the story of what happened, how they saw it, the story through their eyes. And so if they interviewed one of them, he would probably say, yeah, you tell him about that day, he would probably say, yeah, we were serving the guests, we were bringing them food, we would bring them drinks, and the party was going on, everything was fine. And then I heard somebody mention that they ran out of wine. And so that was going to turn into a very embarrassing situation. And he would probably say, I was preparing myself to hear some angry comments from the guests. You know, can you imagine the waiter or the servant comes and the guest wants more wine and he says, we ran out, we don't have any more. And so some people would probably get angry. They would probably mention something and express the fact that they're not pleased with this. He would say, yeah, the hosts of the party, they seemed to be in panic. They didn't know what to do. But then there was this lady that was obviously helping or familiar with the hosts, and then she came up to us with a man, and she told us, do whatever he tells you to do. The man didn't seem like he was willing to get involved very much, but it was his mom. She said, honey, you have to help these guys. And the man, he told us to fill those huge, massive jars with water, 20 to 30 gallons each. And so we went to the well and we started pouring water into those. It took a while. I don't know why he told us to do that. I don't know how that bringing all the water, going back and forth, pouring water, trying to get those jars full, I really don't know how it was going to help the situation with them not having wine at all. Like, how is bringing water into those jars, how was it going to help? But I'm just a servant. I mean, nobody's asking my opinion. Nobody's asking me what to do. Nobody's asking my directions or what I think about those things. And so when those massive jars were full of water, which actually took a while, I don't know if I mentioned that or not, it was a lot of work to fill those up with water. But when they were full of water, the man tells us to get some water, to draw some, and take to the master of the banquet. And I did that. Again, I had no idea why. I don't know what it would do, but I thought, honestly, I was thinking, if he was thirsty, we didn't have to fill up all those jars with water just to give him a drink. We could just bring him some water and give it to them. And when I drew some water and was on my way and I gave it to him, I was like, why did you make us do all that work? I could just bring him some water if he was thirsty. And then things got crazy. Things got surreal. The master of the banquet tried the water that I brought to him, and he said it was the best tasting wine that he ever tried. I thought he was just pulling my leg. I thought it was some sort of a prank. I thought he was just making a fool out of me. I'm like, because I know, I was there. I was filling those jars with water, and I drew some water, and I brought him water. And he said, yeah, it's the wine. And then I looked, and I saw it was wine. And then we went back into those jars, and the water that we personally, I was there. I took it, brought it there. It turned into water. Craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. But the man who did it, he acted like it was no big deal. He was just like, didn't say anything. You know, if somebody else was telling me what had happened, I would never believe them. I'd think they were crazy. I'd think they were just lying or just making things up if I wasn't there myself. You know, at first I was pretty irritated when the guy had us do all the work. And I was wondering how in the world that would help the situation. I was irritated at first, but then I was stunned. I was amazed. I think I saw a miracle, and it's pretty mind-blowing. And I got to be a part of something great. Just because I did what I was told to do. And I'm sure that he did not need us to do all that stuff. Obviously, he could do it without us doing anything. But he allowed me to be a part of it. And now, I really want to know who he is. You know, the servants, that day, they learned something very, very important. And we can learn the same thing that they learned that day. And the thing is, when we are obedient to God, when we choose his will over our will, when we are obedient to God, we get to be a part of his amazing and supernatural work in us and around us. Why is this important? I think it is important for us to understand that because we tend to look at obedience as something that God needs. When God tells us to do something that we either don't understand or disagree with, usually we do things our own way. Let's be honest. Not very often, we just no, I'll just stick to what I know. I just stick to what I think will work best. Sometimes, occasionally, we just do what he wants. We just give him what he is asking from us. It's like we think he needs it. It's something that he needs, not we need. We disagree, we don't understand why, but sometimes we reluctantly give it to him. Well, the important question is, why did the servants get to be a part of the miracle that happened there? Why? Because they obeyed, and through that, they got to be a part of that miracle. Could Jesus do the miracle without the servants? Oh, yeah. Did he really need the water to be transported from one physical location into another one for that miracle to happen? No. I mean, he could just think, he could flip a finger, he didn't have to do anything. He could create the wine if he wanted to. Logistically, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, there's too many extra details and people to get him to involve in this whole thing. I mean, too many parts and elements that he used, he got into the situation. The servants, the water, the jars, the master of the banquet. They're all unnecessary for the miracle itself if you look at it. If you know the power of God, you understand that all those things and people, they're all unnecessary. It's just extra stuff. Jesus could do the miracle without any of that. But Jesus chose to use all those things and people. Think about this. Did Jesus' task seem or feel transformational, maybe life-changing to those servants while they were doing what he told them to do? Do you think they felt like they were just doing something incredible that people thousands of years later several thousand years later, will read about and be amazed? Do you think that's what they thought about? Taking water from the well, probably, buckets of it, and filling out those jars and going back and getting more water and bringing it to this jar and pouring it in. Doing it several times until they were full. Do you think during that time, while they were doing the work, do you think they were feeling like they were doing something incredibly important? Transformational, life-changing thing? No, it didn't feel that way. It just felt, you know what it felt like? It felt like work. That took their time, that took their energy and strength. Didn't make any sense at all. Did not make any sense. They did not understand how all that water, all that work was going to help the situation that happened, that people ran out of wine. They got to experience and be a part of something great, of a miracle, because of their obedience. Not because of all the factors, and not because of how it felt, but because of their obedience to what Jesus told them. Jesus could easily do without their help, but he allowed them to be a part of God's great miracle. And so when we are obedient, when we choose God's will over ours, we get to be a part of God's amazing and supernatural work in us and around us. So what other areas, you didn't think I would let you go without just getting in your life a little bit, getting in your business. What other areas of your life where you are reluctant to obey God? Where? What are those areas where you know what God wants you to do, but you think, no, I'm just not going to do it. It doesn't make any sense. How will this help? It's never going to work. Well, sometimes we're just plain stubborn. We're just like, no, I'm not going to do that. I know you want me to go and resolve this conflict. No, I'm not going to do it. It's their fault. I don't care. I'll wait till they realize that they're guilty, it's their fault, and they will come to talk to me. I'm not going to do what you want. I'm not going to be a peacemaker. I know you say that the blessed are the peacemakers, but no, it's not my fault. I'm just going to stay here. I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to go and try to make peace. I'm not going to stay pure. I know you talk about purity, but we're in love, you know. Everybody else does it. Nobody dies. Everybody gets into sexual relationships. Those old-fashioned things, they're just written 2,000 years ago. Who cares? I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to be like everybody else. They're doing fine. No problems. So I'll do the same. And that can go on and on and on and on. All kinds of areas where we choose to disobey God. And then we wonder, why do I not feel God's presence in my life? Why do I not sense Him working in my life? Through our obedience, God lets us into His work. He allows us. Our obedience is something that we need, not something that God needs. We need to obey Him. We benefit from it. We're the ones who will reap the fruit of just stepping aside and doing what God tells us instead of sticking to our own will and understanding. What am I robbing myself of by refusing to obey God's will? I mean, if you ask the servants, their Jesus story and their recommendation to us would be, choose to obey. Do whatever He tells. Like Jesus' mom said, like usually, oftentimes, like, do whatever your mom tells you to do, right? Most of the times, it's the best thing to do. They would tell us the same thing. Do whatever He tells you to do. It would be their recommendations, even when you do not understand why. Do whatever He tells you, even if you don't understand why. Remember, what did the servants think of Jesus' idea, of Jesus' task, while they were doing the work? They probably thought it was the stupidest thing that somebody could tell them to do in that situation. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. They ran out of wine, and you're making us bring all that water to those jars. Like, it's just, who does that? How's this going to help? But it was not their understanding that got them to be a part of the miracle, but their obedience. Choose to obey even when you don't understand why. Because we get to witness and we get to experience God's powerful work when we choose to be obedient, even when we don't understand why. He gives us the privilege. It's not something that he needs. He gives us the privilege of being a part of His great work. That was the servant's Jesus story. What's your Jesus story going to be? And we will continue next week.